Korthal's heavy boots echoed through the gleaming corridors of the Galactic Accord's central station, a sprawling nexus of steel and light, orbiting a distant star. Centuries of war had sharpened his senses to every sound, every flicker of movement. But today, the throng of delegates, diplomats, and soldiers swarming the vast hall felt alien, even unsettling. He was a warrior, not a politician. A predator bred for battle, not ceremony. The Vrak Dominion's representative had seen countless wars. He had stared down collapsing worlds, battled shape-shifting assassins, and commanded fleets that could vaporize planets in moments. Yet as the newest member of the Accord stepped onto the stage, Korthal's pride simmered with disdain. Humans, a species barely a blink old by galactic standards. They'd barely scratched the surface of space travel, barely survived their own chaotic planet. He stood stiff, muscles coiled beneath his scaled skin, watching the human delegation arrive. Their leader was a man whose smile didn't quite reach his eyes, an expression Korthal recognized, hardened, cautious, haunted. Behind him were others, soldiers by the look of their worn uniforms, their scars visible beneath sleeves or hidden in their eyes. The ceremony began. Speeches praised the diversity of the Galactic Accord, the promise of peace, and the hope that humanity might finally join the civilized races of the stars. Korthal's attention wandered, fingers twitching near the hilt of his plasma blade, imagining how quickly he could tear through the delicate diplomacy to remind them what true power looked like. Then came the moment that silenced the hall. The human veteran, Sergeant Alicia Reeves, was called forward to receive recognition for her role in the Jovian conflict, the first interstellar war fought by humanity without galactic allies. The hall's mood shifted. Eyes that had been polite, indifferent, now sharpened with interest, some with skepticism. Korthal's nostrils flared. What could a single human soldier possibly offer beyond primitive tales? Reeves stepped forward. She was smaller than Korthal expected, but her presence filled the room. Scars crossed her face and neck, some jagged and old, others faint but telling. Her movements were deliberate, each step a quiet declaration of resilience. Her left arm was mechanical, intricate joints glinting with purpose. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady, but with a hardness that cut through the pomp. The Jovian conflict wasn't just a war, it was a test. Against monsters, against starvation, against fear itself. We survived when others thought we'd break. Korthal's eyes narrowed. Monsters? He knew of bioengineered threats, but he had dismissed human warfare as tribal skirmishes, earthbound and insignificant. After the ceremony, Korthal was summoned to the human delegation's meeting room. His superior ordered him to debrief the veteran, extract information, evaluate humanity's military capability. Inside, the room smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee. Reeves sat across from him, her gaze unwavering. "Why did you fight like that?" Korthal asked, voice rough as gravel. She shrugged, a flicker of humor in her tired eyes. "Because someone had to." Her answer echoed in the silent room, simple yet defiant. Over hours, she recounted battles Korthal had never imagined. Skirmishes in vacuum, where soldiers fought in zero gravity, dodging spores that dissolved flesh. Campaigns under acid rains so fierce they burned through armor. A siege where her unit was trapped underground for days, starving, bleeding, facing madness. Yet every time humans clawed back. Korthal's pride bristled and crumbled in equal measure. The stories were impossible, not because they defied logic, but because they defied what he thought was the limit of endurance. He found himself asking questions he hadn't considered in centuries. How does a species lose so much and still stand? What steel-forged will burns that bright? Could a race that embraced suffering this way truly be the galaxy's next great power, or its deadliest enemy? By the time the meeting ended, Korthal's cold gaze had softened, replaced by something closer to wary respect. He left the room with a mind heavy with doubt and a grudging acknowledgement. Humanity was not to be dismissed. In the stars, centuries of war had forged many warriors, but none like these humans. They were fireborn, tempered by their own relentless hells and ready to ignite. The room was cramped and dimly lit, its walls adorned with old Earth relics, faded photographs, battered helmets, a tattered flag from the Jovian conflict. Sergeant Alicia Reeves sat across from Korthal, her mechanical arm resting calmly on the table, fingers tapping a slow rhythm. The alien's reptilian eyes flicked with curiosity, skepticism, and something close to awe. "Tell me about your first battle," Korthal demanded, voice sharp but tinged with disbelief. "The one where you survived, against impossible odds." Reeves took a breath, her gaze dropping for a moment as if digging into a well of memory too dark to face casually. "Ganymede," she said softly. "The siege of Ganymede. The worst 3 days of my life." Korthal shifted uneasily in his chair. He had fought battles that lasted decades, but the raw pain in her voice unsettled him. "Explain." She nodded, eyes now steady. "We were part of the 4th Battalion, tasked with holding a key mining facility on Ganymede's frozen surface. The enemy was a bioengineered swarm. They called them the Scraith. Think of thousands of creatures bigger than dogs, but built for destruction. Acid blood, claws that tore through reinforced armor, and worst of all, they could spit spores that ate flesh." Korthal's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors, but never witnessed firsthand such relentless brutality. "Your soldiers fought with what weapons?" "Energy rifles, plasma grenades. Nothing fancy, but enough to hold back the swarm. At first." Reeves's voice grew grim. "Then the storms hit, acid rainstorms that lasted hours. Our visors melted, our suits corroded. We lost half our platoon before the Scraith even reached the gates." The alien's scales rippled as adrenaline surged. "Why did you not retreat?" We had orders," she replied flatly. "But that wasn't the only reason. Humans, and we don't back down when everything tells us to run. Our lives don't end with failure. We fight because survival isn't given. It's taken." Korthal was silent, absorbing the weight of those words. Reeves continued, her voice steeling. "For 3 days, we lived in trenches carved into the ice. The Scraith surrounded us, swarming in waves that looked endless. We buried our dead where they fell. We rationed water and heat, shared every last bullet. I watched friends die, sometimes screaming, sometimes silent. We were exhausted, bleeding and freezing, but still we fought." The alien warrior's mind raced. He had led campaigns across battlefields where entire armies were decimated in hours, but the human capacity for endurance stunned him. "You describe this as war, but it sounds like hell." "Hell doesn't begin to cover it," Reeves agreed. She flexed her mechanical fingers. "And it didn't end there. When the facility finally fell, we retreated underground, abandoned tunnels, beneath Ganymede, starving, sick, hunted by Scraith patrols." Korthal's nostrils flared at the thought of such desperation. "How did you survive in those tunnels?" "Ingenuity, stubbornness, and luck," Reeves said. "We scavenged scraps, rigged old mining equipment into traps, and used guerrilla tactics. I lost 3 fingers to frostbite and 1 to a grenade. The prosthetic wasn't a choice, it was survival." Her gaze met Korthal's, steady and unyielding. "You asked why we fight. Because when the universe tries to grind you down, you learn to bite back twice as hard." For a moment, the alien warrior was struck by the raw honesty. He had always valued strength measured by power and victory, but here was something different. Strength born from relentless survival against all odds. "Your species, it endures like no other," Korthal said quietly. Reeves nodded. "We don't just survive the war zones. We survive what comes after. Loss, fear, trauma. We carry it all, and still we stand." The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken understanding. Suddenly, the room's door slid open, and a young human lieutenant entered, interrupting the moment. "Sergeant Reeves, you're needed for the briefing." Reeves gave Korthal one last look, a mixture of defiance and respect. "There's more to tell," she said. "If you want to understand what humans are really made of, you'll listen." Korthal nodded slowly, a newfound respect burning in his chest. This was no fragile species, no galactic upstarts. These humans were survivors, battle-hardened, and unbreakable. As Reeves left the room, Korthal allowed himself a rare thought. Perhaps humanity was the galaxy's most dangerous secret weapon after all. The darkness of the underground bunker was absolute. The hum of distant machinery and the occasional drip of water echoed in the cold air like a slow, taunting heartbeat. Sergeant Alicia Reeves crouched behind a scorched metal crate, her breath fogging inside her helmet. Around her, the air was thick with fear, exhaustion, and something far worse: desperation. Korthal, seated across from her in the cramped briefing room, listened intently as she recounted the nightmare. His scales prickled with unease. This was no conventional war. This was survival in its rawest, most brutal form. They breached the outer defenses just before the storm hit. Reeves began, voice low but unwavering. We were pinned inside the bunker, half our ammo gone, no comms and no way out. The enemy, Scraith warriors, were relentless. They tore through our lines, spilled acid everywhere. It wasn't just a battle, it was a slaughter. Korthal's eyes narrowed. He had known fierce opponents, creatures that struck with ruthless precision, but the relentlessness of this enemy, this swarm, was unlike anything he'd faced. He could feel the weight of Reeves's words settle in the room like a dark cloud. For now, 48 hours we fought in near darkness, she continued. The power grid was down so we couldn't see beyond the glow of our weapons. The air was thick with spores the enemy used to paralyze us mentally. Hallucinations, nightmares made real. Some of my squad mates went mad before the fight even began. Korthal shifted, the memory of such psychological assault sending an unfamiliar chill through his chest. His own warriors had faced mental attacks, but nothing so insidious, so personal. Your species endures not just physical pain, but mental torment, he muttered. Reeves gave a small, bitter smile. Pain is fuel. You learn that quick when the universe wants you dead. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. We lost nearly everyone, but we kept fighting. I remember holding the line with a handful of survivors, barely conscious when the Scraith started tunneling beneath us. They wanted to collapse the bunker and bury us alive. Korthal's nostrils flared. To be trapped underground with death closing in from above and below, that was a warrior's nightmare. But we fought back, Reeves said fiercely. We used the wreckage to rig traps, dropped grenades into the tunnels. When they finally broke through, we were ready. The alien's mind raced. Every detail she shared chipped away at his preconceived notions. Humans weren't just fighters. They were monsters' equals, matched in endurance, creativity, and sheer will. Tell me about the day you dug yourselves out, Korthal demanded. How did you survive after being buried alive? Reeves's eyes glinted with a mix of pride and pain. We were trapped for 12 hours under tons of debris. Half of us died in the dark, crushed or starved. But the rest, well, humans have this thing. We don't give up. We clawed through mud and stone, used our hands, makeshift tools, even teeth. Her mechanical hand flexed involuntarily. I lost 2 fingers digging out. It was agony, but none of us stopped until we broke free. The silence that followed was heavy with respect. Korthal, the battle-hardened warrior, felt something new stir inside him. A grudging admiration, a dawning realization that these humans were something different, not just tough, unbreakable. He cleared his throat. You speak of hope, resilience. How do you endure the losses? The pain? Reeves looked away briefly, shadows crossing her face. Because we have to. There's no other choice. You either survive, or you become a memory. And memories don't fight back. Her voice was steady, but beneath it lay a raw, aching truth. The burden of survival was as heavy as the scars she bore. Korthal found himself nodding slowly. His own empire had crushed millions, conquered countless worlds. But here was a species forged in suffering so deep, so relentless, it made his victories seem shallow. We fight not just with weapons, but with something you Vrak don't understand, Reeves said, her eyes locking with his. We fight with our pain, With our scars. That's why we survive. For a moment, the two warriors sat in silence, alien and human, bound by battle, yet separated by unimaginable differences. Korthal finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. Your species is a storm no one expected. A force born from endless hardship, forged in the fires of hell itself. Reeves smiled faintly, a warrior's smile, hard, tired, but unyielding. Welcome to the fight. Korthal sat alone. In his quarters aboard the Vrak command ship, his eyes fixed on the swirling hollow projections floating before him. The images flickered, Earth's smoldering cities, shattered colonies on Mars, and ragged human soldiers wielding makeshift weapons against overwhelming odds. Each scene told a story of desperate survival, but it was more than that. It was a testament to a species that seemed to thrive on suffering itself. He had dismissed humans as weak when the Accord first welcomed them, a primitive species barely worthy of interstellar notice. But these images, these records, painted a different truth. Pain was not a weakness for humans. It was a crucible. The burning ruins of New Chicago flashed before his eyes, the result of orbital firebombing during World War III. Civilians huddled in underground shelters, emerging only to salvage what little they could from the ashes. Korthal noted the scars on the survivors' faces, not just physical but deeper unseen wounds that had shaped their will. A voice interrupted his reverie. You're studying human history again, came a dry, familiar tone. Korthal turned to see Sergeant Alicia Reeves standing in the doorway, her mechanical arm glinting in the dim light. I want to understand what made your species survive, he said quietly. It seems impossible. Reeves stepped forward, her eyes sharp. Pain is fuel. Every scar, every loss, every broken bone. Humans use it as a weapon against the next. Enemy, she gestured to the hollow projection. Look here. The scene shifted to the Mars colony rebellions. Desperate fighters using improvised weapons, rigging abandoned factories into traps. We didn't have advanced weapons or reinforcements. We had grit. We had to build strength from ashes. Korthal frowned. Your empire's warriors prize strength in combat and victory. How do you transform suffering into power? Reeves smiled, a flicker of something almost proud. It's in our stories. Our children grow up hearing about how their ancestors survived famine, nuclear winters, betrayals. They learn that pain isn't the end. It's the beginning of something, stronger. She leaned in, voice dropping. During the Jovian conflict, I saw soldiers lose limbs and come back to fight with prosthetics made from enemy scraps. Our engineers turned wreckage into weapons and armor. We adapted. We survived. Korthal's eyes flickered to her arm, the intricate mechanical hand a testament to that very adaptation. You embrace your brokenness. We don't just embrace it, Reeves said firmly. We wield it. Every wound is a lesson. Every failure a map to the next victory. The Vrak warrior's mind raced. His own people had always sought perfection through conquest, strength without flaw, dominance without pain. But humanity was different. They wore their scars like armor, their suffering like battle cries. Tell me more, Korthal said. How did this shape your soldiers' mindset during war? Reeves's expression darkened, memories surfacing. During the Titanite offensive, our unit was surrounded, cut off from supplies and reinforcements. The enemy was relentless, chemical weapons, bombing, psychological warfare. But we held. We survived by feeding off our pain. She paused, voice steady but haunted. We turned our desperation into ferocity. When the world tries to break, you either snap or you fight harder. We chose to fight. Korthal nodded slowly. Your people are unlike any I have known. You are forged not just by victory, but by suffering, and it makes you unbreakable. Reeves smiled grimly. Exactly. And that's why the galaxy underestimates us at its own peril. The alien warrior rose, a newfound respect burning in his eyes. I will report this truth to the Vrak High Command. Humanity is not merely a species to be tolerated, but a force to be reckoned with. As Reeves left, Korthal lingered on the hollow projections, a thought crystallizing in his mind. Pain is not the enemy. It is the weapon that shaped the greatest survivors the galaxy has ever seen. The chamber was dark and sterile, humming softly with the pulse of advanced technology. Korthal stepped inside, his scaled skin prickling with unease. Today, he would experience something no alien warrior had endured before, a neural immersion into the memories of a human soldier. Sergeant Alicia Reeves sat calmly, her mechanical arm resting on the console, fingers twitching with anticipation. "Ready when you are," she said. Korthal nodded, his heart, a primitive, stubborn organ, beating faster. The neural interface engaged, and a cold wave swept through his consciousness. Suddenly, he was there. The icy winds of Ganymede screamed past him, biting into his flesh beneath the thin fabric of his suit. He was in the trenches, dark, cramped, and reeking of sweat and blood. Around him, human soldiers shouted orders, fired weapons blindly into the chaos, and cradled the dying. The air was thick with smoke, spores, and the metallic tang of fresh wounds. Korthal's reptilian senses struggled to adapt. His vision flickered as hallucinations, nightmarish visions of lost comrades and impossible horrors, assaulted his mind. He heard screams, not all of them human, echoing through the tunnels. Pain exploded in his limbs. He felt frostbite creeping in, burning cold that numbed and blistered. His fingers twitched uselessly. His left arm, the one now mechanical, felt like it had been torn away, replaced by cold metal. He fell. The enemy was closing in, Scraith warriors clawing through the debris, acid hissing as it burned his armor. He fought, claws slashing, plasma blasting, but every breath was agony. He was starving, dehydrated, delirious. Hours blurred into a timeless hell, and yet, through the darkness, a voice echoed in his mind. "Keep fighting. Don't give in." Korthal clenched his teeth. He forced himself to rise, dragging his shattered body forward, each step a battle against overwhelming despair. Suddenly, the simulation shifted. He was outside the bunker, crawling through mud and shattered steel. His comrades lay dead or dying beside him. The sky burned with fire and smoke. There was no escape, only survival. He looked down at his hands, trembling. They were stained with blood, his own and others. "Why?" he whispered, barely able to breathe. "Because we fight," the voice answered. "Because we endure." The simulation ended abruptly. Korthal gasped, the cold reality rushing back. He sat, stunned and trembling, sweat beading on his forehead. The experience was unlike any battle he had fought, more visceral, more painful. It was not just physical pain, but the crushing weight of hopelessness, fear, and loss. Reeves watched him carefully. "You understand now," she said quietly. Korthal nodded, his voice hoarse. "It is a hell I cannot imagine surviving. Yet you endured." "That's the point," Reeves said. "We don't just survive hell. We become it." The alien warrior's mind reeled. For centuries, he had believed strength was measured in power and victory. But humanity's strength was something different, something born from endless suffering and the refusal to surrender. He looked at Reeves with newfound respect. "Your people are forged in fire that consumes everything else. That fire burns within you." Reeves gave a tired smile. "And it will burn brighter still." Korthal stood slowly, his body aching but his spirit awakened. The simulation had broken him, but also remade him. He was no longer just an observer, he was a witness to humanity's unyielding will. As he left the chamber, he carried with him a single thought, echoing louder than any weapon's roar. This species will not be underestimated again. The war room was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield. Cold steel and holographic maps bathed the room in a bluish glow. Korthal stood silently by the edge of the chamber, watching the human officers strategize. Despite his imposing stature and battle-hardened presence, he felt a rare sense of humility. Sergeant Alicia Reeves paced the room, her mechanical hand tapping a sharp rhythm on the hollow table. Around her, young officers exchanged ideas, some tentative, others fierce with conviction. The human way of war was unlike anything Korathal had encountered, raw, adaptive, and driven not just by strategy, but by a will so unyielding it seemed, almost supernatural. "This is how we survived," Reeves said, voice steady as she outlined their next move. "Not by having the biggest fleets or the most advanced tech, but by refusing to quit. When the odds were stacked against us, we dug deeper, found strength we didn't know we had." Korathal's eyes lingered on the faces around him. Fear, determination, exhaustion, all intertwined. Yet the humans stood tall, shoulders squared, spirits unbroken. "How do you keep going when everything is lost?" he asked quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Reeves looked over, catching his gaze. "Because losing means more than death. It means failing everyone who fought before you, everyone who will fight after. We carry their legacy in our hearts." The alien warrior's mind replayed the countless stories she had shared. Lost limbs, shattered hopes, endless nights of terror and pain. Yet here, amid the whispers of war plans, burned an ember of something far greater than survival. Hope. Will. "Alone cannot win wars," Korathal countered. "It requires strength, weapons, numbers. Will is what fuels all of that," Reeves said firmly. "A soldier who believes in the cause fights harder, adapts faster, and never surrenders. Our technology may be primitive compared to some, but our will, that's unbreakable." The Vrak warrior nodded slowly. He had seen countless races crumble under pressure, their spirits shattered before their bodies fell. But humans? They bent, they broke, but then they rebuilt from the ruins, stronger and fiercer. A junior officer interrupted, bringing up a holographic simulation of their next target, a hostile outpost deep within Skreath territory. "Intel shows heavy defenses and unpredictable enemy tactics," he warned. Reeves's eyes gleamed. "Good. That's exactly what we need. They expect fear, hesitation. We'll give them fury and resolve." Korathal studied the plan, surprised by its audacity. It wasn't just about tactics, it was about mindset. Humans didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought because to stop was to die, not just physically, but as a species. He thought back to the neural immersion, the endless nights trapped beneath debris, the hallucinations, the blood and loss. And yet, those horrors had forged a people who refused to be crushed. "Your species will." "It is more than survival instinct," Korathal admitted. "It is a force that reshapes fate itself." Reeves nodded, her voice low but fierce. "We're not just survivors. We're fighters born from fire and ashes. Every loss, every scar, it makes us stronger. That's why we'll endure." The Vrak warrior felt a rare surge of emotion, a spark of hope he had long thought impossible. Perhaps this human spirit was what the galaxy needed in these dark times. As the briefing ended, Korathal approached Reeves. "You have shown me the true meaning of strength, not in weapons or numbers, but in will. I will carry this lesson to my people." She smiled, tired but proud. "Then maybe one day the galaxy will stop underestimating humanity." Korathal turned, his mind already shifting to the challenges ahead. The war was far from over, but now, armed with a new understanding, he felt ready to face whatever came next, because the human will was unbreakable, and so was their spirit. The battlefield was a shattered wasteland, scarred by fire and ruin. Jagged remnants of what had once been a thriving city jutted from the ground like broken teeth, their shadows cast long and eerie beneath the blood-red sky. The air was thick, with smoke, acrid and choking, as the final battle for the settlement of Ari's station unfolded. Korathal stood at the edge of the ruined plaza, watching as human soldiers moved with relentless purpose through the rubble. Among them, Sergeant Alicia Reeves led her unit with an unshakable resolve that inspired even the most battle-weary veterans. To Korathal, this was the culmination of everything he had witnessed, the living embodiment of human endurance and will. The enemy, a coalition of Scraith bio-warriors and mechanized drones, had launched a brutal assault, hoping to crush the remaining resistance in a single devastating strike. Their numbers were overwhelming, their firepower unmatched, and their tactics ruthless. But the humans were prepared. "Hold the line," Reeves shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Remember who we fight for. Remember why we survive." Her soldiers dug in, fortifying their positions with scavenged debris and improvised barriers. Explosions rocked the ground, sending tremors through the earth. Korthal's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a fierce respect. These humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for hope. Suddenly, the enemy launched their most feared weapon, the Scraith spore clouds, toxic and hallucinogenic, designed to break minds as much as bodies. The clouds rolled across the battlefield like a living nightmare, suffocating and disorienting. Many soldiers faltered, their screams mingling with the roar of battle. But Reeves's unit tightened their formation, using specially designed filters and sheer willpower to resist the effects. It was a testament to the training, but more than that, it was a testament to the human spirit. Korthal found himself swept up in the moment, his alien instincts telling him to flee. But he stayed, compelled by something he couldn't quite name, a bond forged in shared struggle and respect. "Now!" Reeves barked, signaling a coordinated counterattack. Her soldiers surged forward, weapons blazing. Improvised flamethrowers roared to life, incinerating the creeping spores. Explosions tore through the enemy lines as grenades and plasma blasts rained down. The tide began to shift. In the heart of the chaos, Reeves confronted a towering Scraith bio-warrior, its claws dripping with acid and eyes burning with fury. The creature lunged, but Reeves dodged, her mechanical arm swinging with brutal precision. The battle was fierce and brutal, each strike a testament to her unbreakable will. Korthal watched, astonished, as she fought with a combination of raw strength, tactical genius, and sheer determination. The fight wasn't just physical, it was mental, an unyielding refusal to yield. When the Scraith finally fell, a cheer rose from the human ranks, a sound filled with exhaustion and triumph. The battle for Ares Station was far from over, but this moment marked a turning point. The humans had shown that even against insurmountable odds, they would not be broken. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in twilight, Korthal approached Reeves. "You have shown me the power of your people's will. This fight, it is not just for survival, it is for the soul of humanity." Reeves nodded, sweat and grime streaking her face. "We fight because we must, because giving up is not an option, because we are the last line between hope and oblivion." Korthal bowed his head in respect. "Then I will stand with you, not as an outsider, but as an ally." In that moment, the war changed. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The war was not yet over, but the tide had unmistakably shifted. Korthal stood on the observation deck of the Vrak flagship, watching the human fleet prepare for their next campaign. Their ships were battered, their crews exhausted, but their spirit was as fierce as ever. Beside him, Sergeant Alicia Reeves surveyed the scene with a quiet determination. The scars on her face and the mechanical arm that had once been a weakness were now symbols of survival and strength. "The galaxy underestimates us," she said softly, "because they don't understand what it means to fight through hell and come out the other side." Korthal nodded. The years he had spent as a warrior had taught him many things, but nothing compared to the lessons he had learned from humanity. Their endurance was beyond physical strength. It was spiritual, mental, unbreakable. "We have fought alongside your people and seen their will," he said, "not just to survive, but to rise from every defeat stronger than before. It is a force that no weapon can break." Reeves smiled, a rare moment of genuine warmth. "That's what makes us dangerous. Pain isn't the end for us, it's the fuel. Every loss, every hardship, it builds something greater." The flagship's comms crackled to life. "All units, prepare for the final assault on Scraith Stronghold Epsilon. This battle will decide the fate of the sector. The two warriors exchanged a look, an unspoken understanding. The coming fight would be brutal, but they faced it as allies, united by respect forged in fire. As the fleet moved out, Korthal reflected on everything he had witnessed. The horrors of the underground bunker, the neural immersion into human suffering, the fierce battles, and the unyielding spirit that refused to be crushed. Humanity was more than a survivor. They were a legend in the making. The battle at Epsilon was fierce. The Screeth fought with desperation, their bioweapons and relentless waves threatening to overwhelm. But the humans, fueled by decades of hardship, stood firm. They adapted, they improvised, and above all, they refused to break. In the heat of the conflict, Reeves led a daring charge, her squad cutting through enemy lines to disable the Screeth Command Corps. Korthal fought at her side, his alien strength complemented by her fierce resolve. When the core exploded in a blinding flash, signaling the collapse of the Screeth defenses, a roar of triumph echoed across the battlefield. The war was won. Back, aboard the flagship, Korthal addressed the human officers. You have shown the galaxy the meaning of true strength. Your will is a legacy that will echo through the stars. Reeves stepped forward. Our fight isn't over. There will always be more battles, more pain, but we face them not as victims, but as warriors, because that is what we are, unbreakable. As the fleet set course for home, Korthal felt a profound change within himself. The Vrak warrior who had once scoffed at humanity now carried their spirit within him. The humans had taught him that survival was more than endurance. It was transformation. Through pain, they had forged a legacy of unyielding will and hope. And that legacy would shape the future of the galaxy.